The question is real. How much do you actually benefit from taking notes? When you use a second brain product or a note-taking application, are you really benefiting yourself when it comes to being more influential in the marketplace, having more knowledge and access to knowledge, or being able to solve problems in business? I'm going to address that right here. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. I'm that guy online that has 18,753 notes in his Obsidian note-taking application. Now, the current count today is, and that video is probably a couple years old, the current count today is 27,127 notes. And the question that came in, a very real and important question that came in, is how much do you benefit from taking these notes? And this person is not being sarcastic. They have the same dilemma. They're probably like me at times, feeling like they're wasting a lot of time when you can actually read or learn something. Now here, this is very important in the language. Let me read it exactly how they put it. I feel like it's wasting a lot of time while you could actually read, for example, or learn something. Well, my notes are the result of reading. Now, I read on purpose. I don't read as much entertaining material. I do read from a very wide range of topics. In the range of topics, if we were to make a list of the professional topics, which is risk management and business development, and then there's subtopics on that, which could be information management, document retention, how do we learn creative and critical thinking. So if we laid out those subjects of work-related, consulting-related activities, and then we compared it with the topics in which I read and might even take notes about, I have a much broader list. So I read about agricultural topics, environmental topics. I'm a master naturalist, so I have notes where I've attended a seminar on beneficial insects, and then I've taken some notes here. All of this is in the system. So 27,000 records seems like a lot of records, but it's a misnomer number. It's kind of like a headline, a clickbait headline, because it's how are those notes taken? And more importantly, why are those notes taken? And so a lot of folks can take notes because it feels like you're doing something. And at times I'll have an idea come to mind, and instead of writing it on a piece of paper that's on my desk, and now it's a little hard to do drawings. I used to have one of those notepads that were digital notepads, so I could do a drawing and it end up as a PDF file. But now I end up with hundreds of PDF files because when I have an idea, I take a note. And the reason I'm looking around here is because unfortunately, there are piles of papers, literally piles of papers, that include notes that haven't yet been processed. So I will agree that note-taking can be counterproductive or even unproductive if done the wrong way. And you might say, well, Justin, you're doing it the wrong way, but a lot of my thinking is done externally. So first we've got to start with, how do you think? How do you process information? I can sit down and read a book. I read pretty quickly. I've taken speed reading classes. I can read through a book in one sitting. I can just sit down and just read 100 pages in one sitting. I enjoy that. If it's a topic I'm interested in, I'll go through it pretty quickly. But I'll at times savor the moment. So sometimes I'll be reading. So if I'm reading The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, and there's a note in there, and it's like, wow, that makes sense. I want to remember that. I don't necessarily remember it in my brain. I might write it down somewhere. And so some of the notes in my Obsidian are files that include hundreds of notes. Now the notes could be, I organize the notes topically because I'm using a Zettelkasten method, but topically within Atomic Notes. So let me break that down. Why is this important? So first off, if you consume a lot of information, so you're a knowledge worker and you read books or you're working on projects, it is necessary to take notes to synthesize the original material or multiple pieces of material. So I might read 5 books on the same topic, and I want to synthesize those ideas in order to implement the ideas into solving some problem. And so I might read a book like the Eric Hoffer book, and I might say, wow, this is very interesting. What does it mean to me? So that could be one note. It could be just the quote. It could be 3 notes. It could be the quote and some commentary. It could be a note with some bullet points. But there may be a time that I'll sit down after I've clustered notes around a particular topic, and I might say, hey, this is interesting. Maybe I need to write a paper about this. Now, the professional area of risk management, business development, and then the subcategories there are going to be the primary areas that I'm going to build a report or I'm going to write a paper because I'm not in college anymore. So when I was in college, I might do all this reading on purpose to write a paper, but now I'm collecting notes because, well, that's interesting. I don't want to forget it. Now, one thing that I found is very important, because I did show you the pile of paper on my desk here, is that I actually use engineering notebooks now. So instead of having piles of paper everywhere, I might write something in my engineering notebook. And this book is from 2021. I filled this whole notebook, this whole notebook up in 2021. This one in 2021. This is a way of processing called journaling. Now that's different from the Zettelkasten method, because if I'm going to type it up in the computer and make it searchable, I want those atomic notes that cross-reference, and I can do cross-referencing in the engineering notebook. And the engineering notebook has numbered pages. But my point is, the capture of information is part of my way of processing information. I don't want to rely on my memory, primarily because I took a college level class on how the brain works, and the brain doesn't work very well. The brain can be easily tricked. That's why a lot of people take notes. They feel like they're productive, but then when they look back on the notes, they realize they've got a pile of notes and nothing else. So number one, if you're a student, and I'm a lifetime student, you're going to take notes to capture key ideas and concepts to create a mnemonic reference. Now, what's mnemonic mean? It means a memory tool that's going to help you remember specific and useful information that you may need to recall in the future. So if you're taking notes about things that doesn't really matter to you, it doesn't have a high level of interest, you are wasting your time. But if it's career related, if it's subject or topical related to a course of study, if it's related to some problem that you have that you're trying to solve, these are notes that are highly productive. Now, the act of taking notes itself is not productive at all. You could sit down, read a book, immediately implement the book, and then get the results that was the reason you read the book in the first place. However, life is very busy. There's a lot of distractions. You could get a telephone call. Something could happen. And so the notes also provide a placeholder for knowledge. Now, I also have notes that include all conversations online. I don't engage in social media or answer comments to the blog posts or answer comments to the videos just to do it. I don't need that kind of social engagement. If I didn't have a computer, I could find enough social activities to do. Now, however, I do prefer social activities that are role-based, I guess that would be, like Melee-based, I guess. I'd rather get a message from somebody and then answer that message, like we're doing right here with this particular comment that was made on the massive Obsidian Vault graph view with 18,753 notes. Again, I have 27,000 notes. Now, what I find is by having this external memory, I do tend to take the same notes more than once. And this is very important to understand the concept. Let's say, and I got an example here, I have read these books, so I have at times staff. I have virtual assistants, a secretary, somebody who's doing administrative work. And I have read all three of these books, okay? And these books are about being a great personal assistant. I actually read these books and used these insights myself to have better executive function and skills. Now, this is very important to pay attention to. I had not taken any notes about these books because the notes are in these books. So this is the consumption of information. And not all these books have highlights or anything on it, but sometimes the consumption of information is about, as you're processing materials, taking notes in the margin, highlighting things. But now we have the problem that that's trapped in a book. And I actually thought these copies I actually have PDFs as well that have annotations in them. But so there's like one bookmark in here. I think these are the copies that I have. I'm actually sitting in my conference room where usually assistant would sit. I don't have any assistants at my house right now. This is my home, one of my home office areas. Anyway, here's my point. I can reference that book anytime I need it because I know, mnemonically, I know that that book contains a subset of information on administrative services. And like, for example, the Definitive Personal Assistant and Secretarial Handbook has specific activities on how to accomplish certain tasks in business. So at times I'm responsible for bookkeeping, I'm responsible for following up on emails, I'm responsible for correspondence, but in those times that I'm not, I wanted consistency in the implementation of those activities. And so we use the book as a note because it's got a great table of contents, it's got a great index, it's easy to recall the information. Now, what I find is beneficial about note-taking applications like Notion, like Obsidian, and like all these other platforms, even a bunch of text files in a folder, is that if I want to recall information, I can search for that information. Now, every note I have, if it's as a result of reading a book or a piece of material, has the original citation in it. And so when I go search, for example, I have up on my screen, I have a challenge here with doing interviews. So I do interviews, I answer questions, and the recording is not always clean, and it takes a lot of time to get out of the office to publish for my newsletter or to publish for my consulting work or to publish as a response to somebody's question. Now, what happens here is that I don't want to watch a 30-minute video. I don't want to watch a 20-minute video. I don't want to read a book. I don't want to go in all the details, but those key points that caught my attention are now searchable in a text-based platform. Now, the text is very important because I might run a Python script to cluster, I might be doing text analytics and clustering ideas because I'm writing a new book. But again, what is a deliverable? Why are you taking notes? And then how do we have notes that are conducive or are aligned with those areas in which we may need to produce an output? So I do have notes in here that when I search for the note and it comes up, it is gobbledygook. I found a few lists of keywords so I used to have a hosting company and I was doing a lot of work for hosting companies. I had lists of keywords about virtual private servers and all those keywords. That has no value to me now. That's not useful to me. It's probably not useful to anybody else. So I just delete that note. So yeah, you're going to get notes in the system that are a complete waste of time, that are a distraction. Maybe you're just sorting out an idea. And when you look at the notes in the future, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't seem it's useful. However, if the structure is good and the note is a mnemonic, so it's a memory aid, it may trigger an idea. You may look at that note and say, and this says right here, objective, clean interview with guest, normal volume on both sides, ability to share screens. Okay, so that might trigger my brain. I need a product to help me do this, or I need an assistant to help me with this, or I need to hire an editing company. It hasn't solved the problem, but it has reminded me that I have this thing going on so that when I take the note, I can just let it go in my brain. I don't have to fill my brain up with a bunch of stuff that isn't going to benefit me today. When it comes to administrative assistant activities, I like these books so much, I dedicated a space on the desk next to a person who would be doing administrative work, and I use these books too. And so when that administrative person was in here, maybe I've hired somebody new and they have a question about how to respond to emails or the difference between white mail, which is correspondence from potential customers, versus administrative mail that might be, a digital copy of a bill. How do we manage those things? I don't have to answer that question. I can say to them, hey, there's a couple of books right next to the desk. Why don't you browse through those and then come back to me with a procedure or a process. And then that procedure or process, I may codify it in my note-taking system, print out a PDF file to them, and then that's the procedure we use in-house. But all the notes getting up to that point, all the details about preference, all of that can come together in a cluster of ideas to produce that paper faster than if I had to sit down and read all three of these books right away and then write a procedure. And in many cases, I might get in here and say, oh, look, on page 146, just do that. So we have to, and to avoid that wasting of time, we are optimizing our time to build artifacts and tools that will, again, move you towards an outcome, a specific outcome. We have a program about outcome management. A lot of people today are trying to start businesses and they're trying to do this, trying to do that, and the shiny objects and distractions have them all over the place. And the original intent, why is it that they started the business in the first place, is completely lost. And next thing you knew, they're feeding social media platforms. They're feeding the YouTube algorithm. They're trying to make friends and influence people, and they're not making any money in business. The reason you would start a business might be for the tax implications. It may be to serve a specific customer group and exchange value. But again, it can be easily distracted. So again, the notes become an anchor. So in my notes system, for example, I have project profiles. And so that I can pull up with a particular tool here. And I'm not sharing my desktop right now because if we were doing a coaching, I would tailor what I show you based on your specific needs. And if you were a business owner or an executive and you wanted to be more productive, these notes provide a personal preview of where information is stored and such. A lot of solopreneurs, for example, copywriters, marketers, folks that have small agencies, they can use a note-taking application to organize ideas as they're writing content, organize ideas as they're managing day-to-day marketing campaigns. Now, is a second brain or note-taking application the end all? Not necessarily. If you have a team of people, for example, if you're in a research lab, I've worked with academics before, you may have a bunch of researchers that are bringing together information, and you may want to all be in the same repository. So platforms like Lotus Notes, SharePoint, any kind of document management system where you can search, those will help library key information and then help you manage and delegate a team to gather that information up. Because again, the note-taking is about simplifying, translating, creating reference to, and delivering large, complex sets of data into smaller bite-sized chunks so that we can make informed decisions as we create some kind of deliverable. When we're looking at this, what is the benefit of taking all these notes? Well, if we use the notes and we can easily recall the content from these notes, then the benefit is that I save a tremendous amount of time. I would still read the book. So sometimes I'm going to solve a problem. I'm going to buy 5 books on the topic. I'll read all 5 books. I'll outline the key ideas and concepts that are relevant to the problem that I have. I'll, from that outline, build out underneath that maybe some procedures, maybe some checklists. These are all notes. An outline is a concept for notes. And then at the end of that, I will go use the outline or the procedures or the checklist in the course of business to get the outcome and result. Now, in my case, because I own a publishing company, I might use those procedures for 5 or 10 years. I might develop notes and profiles and preferences around those procedures. And then after 10 or 15 years, I might be able to come out and just publish a book about it. So I have a program called Podcasting for Profits. I've been podcasting for more than 20 years, and I've made profits podcasting. And so I've now gone from notes on how to do something years and years ago to tuning my skill set as I progress, being a continual learner, being a lifetime learner. And then ultimately, I end up with a big library of materials. What I like about Obsidian is it allows me to do these clusters. Now, you can do that with machine learning. You could do that with text analytics, but it does a good job of giving me a cluster. And if I see a cluster that's highly concentrated, and I've had 10 or 15 questions from clients about that particular topic, I might publish a report or a paper, or I might write a course, for example, and now I'm going to monetize those notes. Now, when I wrote those original notes, the intent for the note was so that I could do a podcast. And then I realized, well, creating a podcast doesn't have a lot of value if you don't have listeners. It doesn't have a lot of value if I don't have specific target listeners. It doesn't have a lot of value if those listeners aren't willing to pay me to solve a problem. It doesn't have a lot of value if I don't consistently publish it. And see all that timeline, that long timeline, develop notes and I refine the notes because it's part of a thinking process to produce an outcome, to clarify information, and then to ultimately get to where I am. And then because I have the notes, those are artifacts. I might even have articles. I might have a podcast about podcasting or a report about podcasting. I can then flip those materials into a book deliverable, into a course deliverable, into something else. Now, a lot of my materials, and to be fair, a lot of my notes were commissioned. And let me share what that means. So I can read something, I can learn something, I can attend a course, But over the years, I'm going to attend supplemental materials building on my previous lessons. But there are times a client will come to me and say, Justin, you're good at writing technical documents. You're good at doing research. You're good at managing small teams to do these things. I'd like you to create for me a report on. So for example, when COVID first happened in November of 2019, a client came to me and said, hey, something's going on here. What's the opportunity? So they asked me to write a report because they wanted to know how they should handle COVID in their business. And I did say 2019. This was before it was in the news. Very often, the notes I've taken in the past position me as someone you turn to when you need answers for obscure topics. And so I did my research. I pulled my documents. And when I'm doing research, I'm downloading all the original PDFs that I run into. I could be creating PDFs. I'm taking notes in my note-taking system. I'm using Zotero to manage my references between different documents. I'm analyzing information and then writing a summary analysis. So that particular client, I said, look, we've got 3 issues here. We've got origin. We've got how to respond. We've got other connotations or issues. And I said, which of these would you like me to cover the most? They weren't as concerned about the origin, but they were concerned about how their company should respond and the legal liability associated with their response. Because again, my area of expertise is risk management. And so they say, okay, what's the human resources risk? If we send everybody home versus keeping them in the office, if we require vaccines or don't require vaccines. So I ended up having several clients to write the commission report, because the way I do a commission report is I have 5 or 6 clients and I'm writing one report for 5 or 6 clients. And so again, I gather their questions. I gather their areas of concern. I gather the frustrations that they have. I gather the outcomes that they're looking to accomplish. And then they don't worry about it. They go on with the regular course of business. They've got important things to do. And then I bring in my researchers. I bring in my what I do. I build these note sets. And then from the note set, I turn around and create a commissioned report, which then the client will provide feedback. And then we will tailor the report to finalize based on their feedback. Because a lot of times, why commission a report if the report isn't going to give you a plan of action or multiple plans of action so that you can solve a specific problem? Again, why do I show you that whole workflow? Because in my world, as a technical writer, as a copywriter, as a marketer, I create a lot of collateral materials that have a high value to recycle. And so if you're going to take notes, you want a high value to recycle. Now, again, maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm special because I recycled my Punic Wars report from elementary school through high school, and I kept adding to the report, and I kept expanding the report. I can't find the damn report, and I don't remember anything about the Punic Wars, but I do know that as I recycled materials, I could write the report faster. I could write it at a new level. I wasn't turning in the same report. The elementary school report was elementary school quality. The middle school was middle school quality. But ultimately, I didn't have to go back. So I've got notes that are more than 23 years old in this system that from time to time will be recovered. But if I were to look at the activity of these reports, so 27,000 notes, probably only 20% of the notes are being used today. The rest of them, if they were deleted, I wouldn't care, wouldn't necessarily care. However, my business model is, as a writer, is built on specific topic areas. And while I may be taking notes on areas of interest, it's more for memory purpose. So if I take notes on specific areas of interest, I might just use that because I'm interested in the topic, and I might be thinking later, hey, I'd like to attract some beneficial insects. Do I have any notes on beneficial insect habitat? And then I might have that. It may not fit the need or purpose of what I'm trying to accomplish then, but I might have links to webinars or to a link to a YouTube video or something where I can get additional information. So again, it's a very important question. A lot of folks are wasting time taking notes because they don't have a system for using the notes to create some kind of deliverable. A lot of folks take notes without following a guideline that works for them. So Zettelkasten works for me because that's how I was already taking atomic notes 20 years ago before I knew what Zettelkasten was. And I was making cross-references. And again, the engineering notebooks, I've used engineering notebooks a long, long time, even into high school, because I grew up near Pax River, and there's a lot of engineers, and they use engineering notebooks. And I love the fact that in the corner, there's a number for every page. So if my notebook has a code, so this is notebook 004, I can go 004 dot whatever page and recall information. I've been doing that for 20 years. I had no idea what Zettelkasten was because I was shown that by engineers. And then these are legal logs, by the way. And so when you're inventing things or coming up with new ideas and concepts, this evidences my original thought. That may not be as anal. You may not be that anal retentive. You may not care. But again, when I was in college and I had to write a 20-page paper, I could knock that out. In fact, this skill set was so valuable that I have written other people's doctoral theses. So I can take any topic. Now, I don't do this for any topic. I do it for topics that I have some level of interest in because it is an arduous activity to write somebody's master's paper or doctoral thesis. Again, if you're just taking notes for business, maybe you're a content developer and you're writing content for a newsletter, having these atomic notes on different ideas and concepts, having copies of conversations with customers, those things actually make it useful to write content that somebody cares to read. Because again, if you're writing notes that you can't use or notes that you'll never use, then why write the note in the first place? Now, reading the book. Reading the book is important. I've read some books multiple times. And like I said, I've taken notes inside of books that I find very useful. But I've also done, in the course of my consulting activity, deep level analysis of books. So the book Rules for Radicals, I probably recorded maybe 8 hours of the concepts of the book. This was a commission with a client during the BLM riots. And then there's other, the January 6th and stuff, people have come in and asked stuff. So I've looked at, okay, Rules for Radicals. There's Mass Delusions. There's a bunch of different books. I might have gone in and read those multiple times. And so those books actually have notes inside the book. Archipelago, the Gulag book. I can go back and reference my notes on that. I wouldn't want to read that almost 1,000-page set of books again. So we've got the original text. We've got notes that provide a mnemonic reference to what's in depth in the book itself. And then we can build on top of that whatever the deliverable is. And I keep going back to the deliverable. Do you have to write a term paper? Are you writing a master's thesis? Are you writing a doctoral thesis? Are you writing a paper for business purposes, a white paper, special report? I'm the author of Establish Instant Credibility, and the premise of the book is that you're going to write a report for a specific audience that demonstrates your ability to do complex services so that they'll hire you for high-ticket services or they'll hire you as an employee. Again, taking the notes makes that easier. Taking the notes helps you discover new ideas, but if you're not going to use the notes, then don't bother. I believe the second brain tools make it easier to take notes, but that ease often makes it easy to take notes about things that don't have any use or value. Also, you have to be careful not to be contemplating. There's a lot of distraction on social media where people are contemplating things that have no real application in their own life. And so if you fill your notes up full of those conversations, the latest burns and comebacks that you can use on social media, it's not going to be beneficial. It could be entertaining, but not necessarily beneficial. So again, the question was, how much did you benefit? I make my living off of these notes and these observations and the analysis of these notes and the derivative materials created from notes and observations combined. Is it wasting time? It is. Probably 50% of what I do, like this pile of material, I cannot search through this pile of material. I have to literally sit down every day and pull this material out, where in an engineering notebook, I've got a table of contents, which I just picked that up and stuff fell out of it. See, it's not perfect. But if you're too focused on making it perfect and making every note productive and making every book you read tied to your career or tied to your area of interest, you're just going to burn a lot of time, and you're never really going to become a subject matter expert. Now, taking notes, I didn't know 23 years ago or even 30 years ago that taking notes was going to help me become a subject matter expert. I had no idea. I just knew that taking notes made it easier to write a paper. I could take notes on index cards, and then each index card had a unique title, a unique subject, and a little title. And I knew that if I put those index cards on the floor or whatever, put them on a table, I could organize those notes into an outline, and then it made it easier to write a paper. And so these are skill sets that overlap, that the tools themselves can distract, but it's not a waste of time if you're using the notes. Now, if I made a giant pile of index cards, and each index card had a nice little title and a little note on it and had perfect cross-references, and I never put it in an outline, and I never filed it in a cabinet in an organized way, and I never recalled those materials, then yes, I would be wasting time. I have complete books. I have a book on how to optimize business-to-business websites. It's a stack of index cards, probably about that thick, and I never wrote the book, ever, because I didn't have an audience that wanted to buy the book. And if I'm in the business of writing books and reports and courses that people buy, why write the course that nobody wants to buy? And then the underlying fact here is that how do I know nobody wants to buy it? Because I have methodology for publishing. So if you work from the methodology for publishing, demand-focused activity, then you're likely to take highly valuable notes. But even though if you just take notes, notes that don't tend to be valuable, if you can do them in a fast way, then as long as you're not focusing too much time there, you'll be good to go. So I hope this has answered your question. I do actually go back and read the books. How do I know what books I should read? Because the notes are a mnemonic device. And why do I take notes? Because I write documents and reports and I publish materials, but I also take notes in areas of just general interest, gardening. Actually, the notes in general interest ended up becoming a blog. I have a blog that has, it's kind of popular, not super popular, but again, it's my outlet. So I think the last thing is, because he says, read, for example, or learn something. I think the notes are part of my learning process. And so if I'm shoving a lot of stuff in my brain in topic areas tied to my work and career and my professional life, and then a lot of topics tied to my personal life, I know the brain doesn't remember things. It actually reconstructs ideas and memories. I don't want to reconstruct it the wrong way. Okay. So I want to take the notes so that if I have to answer a question, like in this case, I can give you an authoritative answer. Now let's end this with this last bit here. So I've gone on 33 minutes about how taking notes is useful. And this video is not transcribed. It's simply loaded to YouTube and I reference it in the comment. And I did that because I can answer the same question many times. So if somebody else asks this question, I can link to the same video. So it's a time-saving activity. But I don't have the transcript of this video somewhere. So I'll have a note that represents this video and has a link to this video. So if anybody ever asks the question, how much do you benefit from taking notes? I don't have to answer the question again. I can point to this video. If they have additional questions, more specific questions, or they've hired me for a consultation because maybe they're a publisher, maybe they're a writer, maybe they're a copywriter or marketer, maybe they're a business executive who's taking notes throughout their entire career and then wants to publish a book when it comes time for retirement, for passive income, for example, then I've actually built a stream to drive leads into my course of business. And therefore that original note, as insignificant as it is, will help me find this video so that I can share it with the next person. So I hope I've given you a couple practical examples of how note-taking can be very productive, but also a big distraction. I hope I've given you some ideas on how note-taking is only part of a larger process for publishing or creating some kind of deliverable. And then finally, I hope I've shown you how note-taking is actually a mnemonic device to help you recall information in a way that's actually beneficial to creating an outcome. Because I didn't even go into artificial intelligence, but essentially the querying mechanism you use to recall these notes, we want to make sure that you understand what you're recovering so that you can use what you're recovering in your note-taking system. I want to thank you for being a part of what we do here. This is now a podcast episode, so that's a third use for this particular video. And I I hope I'm stimulating those ideas and concepts, because as a knowledge worker, you're paid on productivity that is difficult to measure. And you also have to have evidence in many cases when you're in higher stakes activities. And so note taking is a critical part, but not a primary part of getting results. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, where we help business owners and executives, knowledge workers and professionals use knowledge to gain influence, whether that's a better career path, whether that's layoff proofing your current position, or creating a business on your own. We show you how to use, store, manage information in such a way that it works on your behalf. I'll never have to go take those notes again if I take good notes in the first place. And then I'll use those notes many times so they'll pay for themselves if I have that outcome focused. You can visit us at www.insidestrategicrelations.com to ask questions, or put some questions in the comments below. I would love to answer your question, because it challenges all the notes I've taken in the past. It challenges all the professional skills and insights that I've gained, and gives me an opportunity to package this up and hopefully be useful to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.